Welcome to the International News Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Dunicic. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. While millions of Americans and countless people the world over continue to be distracted by the events at the recent Oscars, countless and heinous war crimes are being committed by Russia in Ukraine. Yes, undeniably, what happened at the Oscars between these actors is undeniably interesting. Will Smith is one of Hollywood's greatest actors. Chris Rock is an exceptional comedian. And Jada Smith is a cunt. These are fascinating people. And the things occurring between them and the dynamics are interesting to follow. But there are much more important things occurring the world over where countless people are suffering and unspeakable atrocities are happening to them. It's ironic because a month ago, it seemed like many people in the West were changing their social media profile pictures to be the old Ukrainian blue and yellow. And I saw many Americans grammatically incorrectly trying to say Slava Ukraini. Many people said that they supported Ukraine and cared about these people, but the reality and time has shown that these people were only following a basic social media trend to be popular and gain likes and show their friends that they are woke. Now, while these people seem to have stopped giving a relative shit, I have not. I still give a very invested and firm shit about the events that are happening in Ukraine, and the developments are disturbing. We have covered these events extensively, but what I'm going to talk about today is going to be the darkest moments that have come to light that have occurred throughout this war. As we've previously reported, Russia has pulled back from many of its positions in northern Ukraine. Russia has officially stated that it's doing so in order to build good faith and trust ahead of continuing and developing peace talks between Ukraine. Now, the reality seems to be that Russia is in fact just pulling these troops back to regroup, reinforce, and remobilize its soldiers and focus on the eastern Ukrainian region of Donbass. Now, we're not going to focus on Russia's military goals during this podcast, and we're not going to focus on its geopolitical intentions or what it wants from these peace talks. We're going to focus on something that's much more real and affects every single human every day that is unfortunately living through this crisis and this conflict. Now, I do want to state ahead of time that what I'm going to talk about is pretty dark, and if you are sensitive to topics such as mass murder, execution, torture, and rape, I highly suggest you stop watching the video right now. As Russian soldiers have been pulling out of areas in northern Ukraine, Ukrainian soldiers have been taking them back. Now, as they've been taking back these parts of city, these villages, and these different territories, many corpses have been found that shed light on massive, atrocious, and widespread war crimes committed by Russian forces. Civilians have been found with their corpses point blank shot in the back of the head. Bodies have been found tortured in chambers where countless Ukrainian civilians have been tortured. Women have reported being raped in front of their children and their husbands. These atrocities are terrible. For those trying to get away, some Ukrainians were crushed by Russian tanks in their cars or even simply for the amusement of bored Russian soldiers. Countless more war crimes have been committed, and approximately 410 corpses have been found mangled or that have shown signs of other humanitarian violations being committed against them during or causing their deaths. Now, Russia denies these allegations and states that these bodies are staged or have been posthumously tortured by Ukrainian forces to make it seem as if Russia has been doing this. The women who have alleged rape or family members who have stated or given their accounts of Russian atrocities that lived under their occupation have been accused by the Russian government of being crisis actors, which I'm just going to diverge for a moment. Crisis actor conspiracy theories are the biggest bullshit. If you are an excellent enough actor to pretend and cry convincingly, pretending that some kind of crisis occurred to you, you deserve a fucking Oscar, more than Will Smith. So these probably don't exist. And historically, Russia has had a tendency and has shown that in other conflicts, including Syria and Georgia and Chechnya, and even the Soviet Union's involvement in Afghanistan, where it has been accused of massive humanitarian violations and war crimes, such as killing civilians, committing torture, and mass rape. These have historically been shown to be tools of the Russian military, and Russia historically has denied these allegations, stating that there's some form of fake news, some form of Photoshop, or some form of misinformation designed to discredit Russia's military actions. But history is not on their side when they are denying this. The corpses and the bodies are there. The witnesses and the victims, in the case of rape, are still alive, and they have their accounts. Now, I'm not saying that every victim is legitimately telling the truth. Some are encouraged to lie, but the reality is, if so many are coming forward, it's probably happening. Now, why is Russia doing this? Do countries just commit war crimes on one another when they go to war? The answer to that question is yes. Yes, they do. War is the worst occurrence that could occur between humans. There is nothing darker. There is nothing more deprived. There is nothing less humane than war. War will bring out the worst. War will bring out the criminals. War will bring out the monsters. But more so than that, Russia seems to have a clear tactic in committing what seem to be systematic and intentional, widespread war crimes. Now, the people that were targeted by this and the victims and the corpses that were found seem to all be individuals that were somehow tied to the Ukrainian resistance. Either they were soldiers themselves assisting in the defense of Ukraine against Russia, or they were other individuals providing some form of assistance, whether it be logistical, informative, intelligence-based, food-based, whatever it may be, that were supporting Ukraine. It seems that Russia was doing this to discourage others from partaking in the resistance by spreading fear and saying, if you help the Ukrainian government or the Ukrainian forces resisting our invasion, we will kill you, we will torture you, we will rape you. And eventually, if you really want to commit massive moral relativism and jump through a lot of moral hoops, you can come to the conclusion that this is a legitimate military tactic. It does assist in discouraging people from helping the Ukrainian resistance, and eventually makes the resistance less strong and Russian forces consequently stronger. However, this is why war is regulated, and this is why things like war crimes and war crime tribunals, similar to the ones that happened in Nuremberg following World War II, similar to the ones that happened in the International Court of Justice following the crimes in Yugoslavia and the crimes that occurred in Rwanda and other nations. This is why these things exist. Because war, even if it is the most atrocious things that humans do commit, can somehow be regulated, and these horrible acts can be prevented. Now, there have obviously been calls to prosecute and persecute the people that have committed these crimes. And the reality is that may or may not happen following the war. Investigators are collecting evidence to eventually bring this in front of some kind of international court. The international community is clearly not on Russia's side. So there will be warrants issued for people that were involved in this when the war in Ukraine is over. Now, Russia is still, despite embarrassing itself massively in the international sphere because of its invasion of Ukraine, which has been a failure, is still a very large and powerful and energy-relevant country that probably is going to protect its military personnel and its own civilians from any form of international prosecution. Now, that is something that is in the long term. What needs to be focused on now is preventing further war crimes from happening. Obviously, war crimes cannot be committed if there is no war in the first place. Peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are continuing, and diplomacy is going to be attempted. However, many Western countries have kicked out Russian diplomats in reaction to these alleged war crimes in Ukraine, which is and does send a good message, but it's going to make diplomatic communication with Russia even more difficult and making ending this conflict much harder. Now, what the West and the international community can do in order to quicken things up and stop this conflict is introduce harder sanctions against Russia. The European Union has, for the first time, suggested introducing sanctions against Russian energy imports. but only coal. Now, that's not minor. Russian imports to Europe based on coal amount to 4 billion euros a year, or $4.4 billion for our American friends. However, if Europe really wants to send a message to Russia and make it more likely for them to come to some kind of agreement with Ukraine, Russian oil and gas, its main energy exports, need to be completely boycotted. Yes, this will cause Europe, the entire continent, to go into a massive economic crisis. But some things are worth struggling for. However this war develops is going to be seen. Though know very, very well that the longer this war continues, more innocent people are going to die. More children will be killed. More women will be raped. More men will be tortured. More people will suffer the longer this war takes. It has taken far too long, and this needs to come to an end. It requires all of our international attention. Some people tell me I report on Ukraine too much. No, I fucking don't. You need to focus on what's happening here, and there needs to be action to stop the atrocious war crimes that are happening in this country and help the people that are suffering. And it doesn't matter whose side you're on. People are dying. Thanks for tuning in. Let me know what you think in the comments, and let's have an open discussion. I'll see you next time.